Hey guys, welcome to Boost Hunter Garage. Today we're going to be working on my father-in-law's 6.7 Cummins here. It's 2018, and it's got a really nasty oil leak on the front. You know, typical Cummins thing, always leaking oil. And while I was away, he had taken it into the dealership to get an oil change and get it checked out. Apparently they did a dye test on it, and from what I understand from reading through the paperwork that they wrote up on it, I believe it's leaking between the front timing case and the block, not between your front cover. Hopefully we're going to get into it. It's hard to tell because the oil's all spread around. It'd be nice if it was just a front timing cover. It'd be a lot easier fix. But we're going to get into it here. And yeah, I'll just try to make this simple and to the point. Not a lot of time lapse, just tell you what you need to do. And I'll be honest, this is the first time I've done to this extent. Like if we do have to do between the case and the block, obviously we're gonna have to pull the cam out, so that's gonna be my first time I've personally done that. So that's why I like to say, can't learn if you don't try. So with this video, hopefully you're able to do it too. So we're gonna get into this thing here, and we'll start with just draining the coolant here. Because we're gonna have to pull, basically this whole front apart to be able to get, especially if we're gonna pull the cam out. So let's get to it. All right, so as you can see, it's a little while later here. I just went ahead and started pulling as much stuff out of the way. And this is the first time I worked on a newer truck like this, and I'm not gonna lie, it definitely sucks working on these new trucks compared to like my '07, my '98. There's just way more things in the way more clips, covers, as you can see. So like, I just moved these covers and let them lay so that you can see I just moved these coolers out of the way. Just be as gentle as possible, just so you don't break anything. Set them off to the side and kind of use these to protect that. You can hear I got the coolant draining, and so here's your plug. And I don't know if you can see on it, but you can't really get a socket on it because there's these little nubs on it. So I just used a pair of pliers. I'll get a light here. So you got to move this out of the way. It's normally bolted right here. And right down there, if you can see it. So it's draining out, and it makes it tough. I wanted to put a funnel to try to funnel it better, but can't really. So I have the boot off the intercooler, so I shoved some rags in it just so it doesn't pour in there. And we got it draining down here into a bucket. So I'm gonna let that drain as much as possible, then we'll pop this top line off just to let some air in there. So yeah, we're just gonna let that drain out, and we'll go from there, because then we'll be able to, once we have this popped off, we can pop the other hose off, and it will drain out, and then we can pull this up and out of here, hopefully without too much fight. There's just, yeah, like I said, a lot of covers and random things to take off. So I'm just trying to keep everything as organized as possible. If I take anything off, I try to put the bolts back right away or sitting over there with the part. Because knowing me, I will mix them up or lose them, so you don't end up with extra bolts when you put this back together. So we'll let this drain out, and then we'll pull this radiator out. Okay guys, as you can see, I basically got the fan out of the way, fan pulley, your tensioner, basically just getting everything out of the way that I can. And next to take off is your power steering pump here. You're gonna see there's 3 bolts just through here. You're just gonna do those and just set the pump to the side so it's out of your way. And then we gotta take the balancer off. And so to crack these, unless you have, usually if you have an impact, you can possibly spin them, but if you were to go wrench on those, it's just going to turn the engine over. So what you're going to have to do is go to on the bell housing here, we'll go underneath, and you're going to take that inspection plate off, and you can see your flywheel there. And what you're going to do, you're going to need someone to help you, but just going to take like a pry bar like that and put it up in there into between the teeth and then against the housing to keep the engine from turning over. and then you will be able to crack those. Once you crack them, you'll be able to spin them off. So I'm gonna go ahead, get those off, and once I pull all that off, I will then be able to take this whole cover off. So obviously there's just all these 10 mils all the way around it. I'm gonna just go ahead, take this off, and then pull that whole cover off, and we'll bring you back for the next to show you the next steps of what we're gonna do here. So there we have it. We got that cover off. You can see it sitting here, and from what I can tell, it looked like it had a good seal. I don't think it was this front cover that was leaking. As you could see when I was taking it off, I had to use a pry bar to break that seal. So I don't think it's that front cover. And from, like I said before, reading the paperwork from the mechanic at the dealership, it sounded like it was the leaking between this case here and the block. So in order to take that all off, obviously here your CP3, you're gonna take this nut off, take the gear off. I believe there should be 3 nuts on the back of your CP3 that bolt it to this case. So you're gonna take those off, and I'm just gonna pop those back, and then that way you don't have to take apart your fuel system and bleed that or deal with any of that kind of stuff. And then obviously to get this cover off, the camshaft has to come out to be able to pull that cover off. So this is going to be your biggest, trickiest thing to do. And you can kind of see at the height it is with this cross member here, or whatever you want to call this support, it's not going to be able to pull right out. It's going to hit the gear. So we're going to have to undo the engine mounts a bit, and we're going to have to push this engine up a bit. I'm going to use a floor jack underneath it. It'd be better if you had like an engine hoist, because you'd hook it on there, pick it up. But to be able to pull the cam out, we got to get at the top of the valve train here. So next I'm going to go ahead, take this covers all off, and then you're going to have to take the rockers off and pull your push rods out. At that point, I'll bring you guys back and kind of show you. I got some wood dowels, because what you're going to have to do is hold your tappets up, and that's what you don't want obviously dropping, because then you're going to be fishing for them in your oil pan, and you don't want to be dealing with that. So I'll go ahead, I'm going to get this top cover all off, get the rockers off, and I'll bring you guys back and kind of show you that step next. Got the valve cover all off, and you can see here I kind of cracked all, so we got to take all our rockers off, and so I just cracked those. You can see I took this first one off and then pulled the push rod out, and I got this 1/2-inch wood dowel here, and I'm gonna drop it. I pushed it down in there. So this 1/2-inch wood dowel, and then you can see I put a taper on the end, just like with some sandpaper, put a bit of a taper if you can see that. And then I cut, just with a hacksaw, an X in there, just about that much. So that what we're gonna do when I pull that push rod out, we're gonna push this down in there, I'm gonna tap it with a hammer, and it'll go into the tappet that's riding on your cam, and then you can feel it. So I'll kind of, I don't know if you can hear it. So this one's down in there. You can hear, I'm not sure if you can hear that, the tappet kind of hitting the top. So I have it stuck on there, and you want to make sure that's stuck on there real good, because you do not want to drop your tappets in there. So I'll go ahead, take these all off, and then I always just, so here, I'll take this one off here, that off, and then I just keep everything in order, because I'm big on not trying to mix things up, and I'll just have them all in order here. So I put them back in the exact same spot and torque them down. In my belief, I could be wrong on this, if you torque everything back down, they all went back in the same spot, your valve lash should stay the same. Don't quote me on that. Someone might hit me in the comments with that, but you could go through and check your valve lash after. But we'll worry about that later on. So we took that out. You're going to pull your push rod out, Throw that there. And then we're just gonna take this, drop it down in there, kind of feel it in there. I just took a hammer, give it a few smacks so it sits in there, and then make sure that's stuck on there so I can feel it there. I might give it a couple more taps just to make sure. And then what you're gonna do, pull these both up like this, and then I'm gonna zip tie them together so it kind of holds them up and it's squeezing against, you know, this inside there so that it's holding them up and they can't drop. So I'm gonna go through and take all this off here. Like I said, do that. And then when we get up in the under the cowl here, it's super tight. So I might have to shorten these. These I made 16 inches long just because I had 4 pieces at 48 and I just split it up. I might have to shorten them. And then underneath your cowl here, to get those push rods out, obviously it's gonna be hitting. There's 2 little plugs under there in the bottoms of the cowl, rubber plugs. You're gonna pull those out. It allows you to slide up in there and then pull it out. So once I do that, I'll show you those plugs. They just can't get the camera up in there. So I'll go through, get these all off, and I'll bring you guys back. So there we have it, guys. All zip tied up, holding them all up. These are just those plugs. There'll be 2 of these up underneath that cowling that you need to use to be able to get the push rods out. The dowels, I definitely had to cut quite a bit shorter than these ones to get those to work. So now, also I was gonna mention, make sure you got, you know, either make mark. Some of them are gonna have a 00 and a 0 for your lining up your crank and your cam. So make sure you have that, whether you mark it or just make sure you get all your timing right. Then I'm gonna go ahead and we'll, like I said before, we're gonna take this gear off, take the CP3 off the back, and then take off the retainer for the cam. Then also I'm gonna go ahead, undo the engine mounts, probably loosen up the trans mount so that we're able to lift the front of this engine a bit, just so we can get enough to be able to pull this cam out the front past here. All right, guys, so I kind of got ahead of myself here and didn't pick up the camera, so I'll just show you what I did. First, to get the CP3 nut off before I took the cam out, well, it was all, I just, to break this nut free, I just put these 2 bolts back in the crank, put a pry bar in there just so I could hold the engine still, broke the nut free, and then to pull the gear off, they do make a puller for CP3s, but I just moved, so a ton of my stuff's in storage and I don't know where it is, so I just went to Harbor Freight and picked up like a generic, just like gear puller. I had to modify it a little bit just because it was a little too wide, but yeah, pretty simple. It popped off there like nothing. And then, like I said earlier, to get the cam out with the gear on it, it's gonna hit here. So I undid the engine mounts, undid the trans mount just to be safe so there's no stress on anything. And you can see I have this 2x6 here just along the front rail of the engine with the floor jack, and just lifted the engine up and then just worked that cam out. It kind of hangs up a bit, kind of got it stuck, but then slowly worked it out. So here's the cam, and just this is your cam retainer, just has 2 bolts in it here. Got that out, and then right away I just took this piece of 1¼ PVC pipe and just slid it in there just as a safety, so that if for some reason these let loose and the tappets were to drop, it can't actually drop all the way down. I'd be able to put the dowels in. So just as a safety, slid that in, just don't slam it all the way back. I don't think on the 6.7s, I don't think you can push the rear freeze plug out. Obviously, you don't want to smash on it, but I think on like a 5.9, you could technically, if you push hard enough, it would knock that rear freeze plug out. But yeah, and then on your CP3, there should be 3 nuts on the back of it. These took me a long time to get off just because there's so much stuff in the way trying to get a wrench in there or get a socket in there to get those off. So I have those off now. And basically we are ready to start just unbolting this cover. I believe we're gonna have to just unplug this, your crank sensor. You're gonna have your bolts on the front of your oil pan that you're gonna have to take off. And then there should be, I believe, one more sensor on the back for your cam. That'll probably, once I get the cover loose and pull forward, I'll unhook that. So at this point, we should be ready to just unbolt this and pull this cover off. Like I said earlier, I got your power steering just undid and put to the side here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just get this unbolted and pull this cover off, and we'll start just getting everything cleaned up and ready to, essentially at that point we'll be almost ready to start reassembly. So we'll get to that. Got the cover off. So this is your cam sensor I was talking about. Obviously just plugs in right there. And so yeah, we got it off. Just where your CP3 is, that's gonna where it kind of hang up. So just wiggled it slowly and got this pulled off. You can see where those bolts were. There's just 4 there, 1 there, and then you got 2 at the bottom you got to take off. So now I'll go ahead, get this gasket off here and get this all cleaned up. Both surfaces cleaned up really good. Clean the block surface up real good. Use a bunch of brake clean, just get everything cleaned up. And when we go do that, we'll get the gasket out and the RTV for everything. So got the cover all cleaned up here. Just used a scraper here, bunch of brake clean, just try to, in general, clean the whole thing up, but make sure this surface is nice and clean. Obviously along the bottom here, did the front also. And then one other thing that you're gonna have to reuse is the front of your pan gasket here. So just really carefully, I just slowly use the razor blade and just pick this off here. Make sure this is all good and clean. We got our new gasket here, and then I'm gonna use some RTV here, just the right stuff. So I'll put a bead around, go around each bolt hole, and then set the gasket on. I'll put it on the other side of it also. And then we'll go over to the truck here. So got the surface all cleaned off here, and I just tried to be as careful as possible, try to catch any of the stuff I was cleaning off. I mean, I'm gonna end up doing an oil change on this thing probably after we run it or a day after. Just end up with some debris, I'm sure, gonna drop in the pan. Luckily, if it's in the pan, it shouldn't get picked up by the pickup tube because of the screen. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'll probably piece that front gasket on the front of the pan here first, and probably use a healthy amount on that, especially in the corners where the gasket's gonna meet up, of the RTV, just to make sure that all seals up good. And so yeah, we'll have that all set up. We'll go ahead and we're gonna put it on here. And then your bolts that are on the inside of it, we'll use Loctite on those, just some blue to 18 foot-pounds. We'll torque those down. The pan bolts on the bottom we'll put in. And then I'll just use some of the bolts from the front cover that feed through, just temporarily tighten those on, and we're gonna let that set on there for a little bit before I go ahead and do the rest. So we'll go ahead and get that all put on there and seal this thing back up. We have it. We got the cover put back on, and then the 5 bolts that are within the inside, I torqued those down to 18 foot-pounds. And then just around the outside, there's only a couple that you can see here that actually pass through to the block. So I just put those on and just tighten them. I didn't torque them or anything, so we taken those back out to put the cover on, obviously. Got those, all the pan gasket, the pan bolts tightened in. These 2 that are at the bottom, got those all tightened up. These ones I put Loctite on the inside here. And I'm just gonna let this sit for a bit before I pop these off to finish doing the rest. So in the meantime, I'm just gonna bolt the CP3 back on, re-plug in the cam sensor, just things that I can do, get this power steering bolted back up, things like that until it's time, and I can take those out, and then we will put the cam back in, obviously jack the engine back up to do that. So for now, just gonna get a few things while this kind of sets up a bit. There, we got the cam in there. That's the most stressful part, at least for me. Just didn't want to end up dropping a tappet. We got ourselves lined up here where this blue mark was on it from before. Also, we'll turn our cam retainer back around, put your 2 bolts back in, 18 foot-pounds. Yeah, so it's in there now. Obviously, you can see I got the engine jacked up here to get past here. I can lower it down now. Kind of past the scary part of where you could have a major screw up. So she's back in there. Like I said, gonna tighten those 2 back down there. All right, got this front cover now all cleaned up, and we'll RTV that, no gasket, just RTV all the way around. Nice good bead all the way around the bolt holes. I knocked out the seal on the front here, crank seal. This is the new one here, just to show you here. So we'll put the cover on first, and then once it's on, then we'll slide this on, and then comes with this tool to tap it in and set the depth. So we'll do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just get this RTV'd up and put on and bolt it on. I personally, I think it says 18 foot-pounds or maybe less for these, but I mean, I just go by feel for putting all these in, but we're gonna go ahead and get all that put back on. Got that cover all on there, all tightened down. And now it's time to put the crank seal in. So don't use any lubricant to put this on. Leave this plastic ring in here. It's gonna help you install it. So you're just gonna put it on, obviously make sure everything's nice and clean. And then it's just kind of hard for me to do it and film it, but you're gonna use this install tool, and I'm just gonna use it dead blow hammer here. I'm just gonna keep slowly working my way around it, tap it in, and then this will end up sitting flush with the surface, and then you know you're in deep enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and just tap that in there. So there we have it. Got that seal put back in there. Now I'm gonna put the dampener back on, torque that to 98 foot-pounds. And basically from here on, is kind of just reassembly, putting everything back on that you took off. All the crucial hard stuff of this video or this task is done. So obviously you can go ahead, cut your zip ties, pull these out, pull your dowels out, because you're good to go there. And it's essentially just going to be reassembly. So put all your rockers back on. Like I said earlier in the video, I'm going to put everything back the exact same spot they were. You know, make sure you got your rocker, you know, your valve bridges on here, and it's 18 foot-pounds to torque down your rockers, and just make sure you put everything back where it was. So I'm not going to do valve wash this time. I believe that if it's tightened back the way it was, it should be good, but I most likely am going to go over the valve lash in a short while here. But for now, I'm not going to worry about it. And I believe within a day or so after I run this a little bit, I'm just going to dump the oil, give it an oil change just to make sure. But basically from there on, you're just going to be bolting everything back on. So I hope this video helped you guys out. Hopefully it was clear and could help you through it. Like I said earlier, this was my first time doing something to this extent, as far as pulling the cam and everything. But at least now, basically all the hard stuff where you could really screw something up is done. So you're essentially just gonna go through, reinstall everything, fill the coolant. You're most likely gonna have to run it a bit and just keep burping it to get the coolant through. So thanks a lot for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.